Bardo time. It's time to do a zine review or certain kind of look gonna be taken at this issue number 6 by Bardo Methodology. I previously featured pretty much all of these issues, so why not continue on the same path? After all, Mr. Niklas Göransson, the maker of Bardo, has been kind enough to reward me with each issue, so it's a pleasant reading once again. Here's how the index looks like for this particular issue. Sorry, it's number 7, not number 6. I guess I get lost in the count these days. So this one features Black Witchery from United States, Gospel of the Horns from Australia, Macabre Omen, I guess Italy. Sorry, is it Greek? Thorbios from German. Antediluvian, can't even remember anymore. Atlantic Codex, I think that is from Great Britain. Mgwa from Poland. Cold Meat Industry from Sweden. Mortis from Norway. Monumentum from Italy. Warlock from Finland. Ordo Templi Aeternea Lucis from France. And Hex Vessel from Finland. Well, kind of a British, but yeah, let's call it Finnish in the case of that these. The person is nowadays living in Finland has been quite a few years. Now, this is a very interesting issue because it goes through various of very different kind of topics. Those of you who don't know what Bardo Methodology is, it's basically a black metal zine, but it's so much more than focusing on black metal. And even though it would be called a metal zine, it includes a lot of topics which are not something that you read on everyday's metal magazine. That is, goes way beyond music, way beyond cover arts, lyrics, touring, and whatever. Actually, so many of these interviews are quite different than, doing a band interview. Sometimes they are totally about something else, even though it might be a band member or an artist who is here interviewed. And that is what makes Bardo Methodology so goddamn interesting. Now, some people it might be too much. That's kind of a given. I mean, comparing to what you would read on Metal Hammer, Kerrang, or whatever mainstream metal release, those are the kind of stuff that grow pretty much the bands that are relevant right now, like doing a new album, going on a mega tour, or celebrating an anniversary. Well, Bardo isn't exactly anything about that. You might find smaller bands, real unknown underground legends, and then you might find something which is relatively bigger. But what is interesting is that no two interviews are the same. It's not like you read 2 interviews from Bardo back to back and figure out these are exactly the same questions, same topics, same answers, same, basically our new album is the best, blah, blah. I mean, this is the epitome of going deeper. This is the antithesis of doing that kind of a happy-go-lucky kind of a metal. Yeah, we were just so much fun. We had hard time with our producer, blah, blah, blah. I hate that bullshit. Now, I know it's kind of ironic that when we were talking about music band, music artist interviews, the least interesting thing is to, find about the very facts like, how did you record that thing? Did you have hard time in studio? Was the producer really whipping your ass? I don't care. Basically, I care how the music ended up there, but I don't care about the process of, doing that. That is, I care about what goes around these artists, like what inspires them, what do they do besides their music and band life and all that stuff. And Bardo often really answers all their little stories about these topics, and this is no exception. However, obviously some bands are more about how to live your metal lifestyle or how these bands came to be, and some are totally different. And I'll give you a few examples because this is a very, very interesting issue. In fact, might be one of the real better ones. I mean, it's kind of easy to say, it might be one of the better ones. If there's only 7 issues out, plus a couple of those archeologies, which are basically going back to Bardo's previous stuff. But anyway, if we can say there's like 7 issues plus a couple of those are like one of the best. What does it even mean? Like one of the best 5 or whatever. So I could say this is maybe the top 2 issues. I don't know which would be my favorite, but this definitely has some of the most interesting stuff. But also some of the stuff which I didn't find that interesting, even though they're interesting ideas. Now, I'm not going to go through each and every interview here. There are no reviews because I mean that would be take quite a bit of time. So I'll just go quickly browsing. For example, the Black Witchery story, pretty nice. Gospel of the Horns, going through the history of the band and all that stuff. Macabre Roman is a little bit different, and these kind of stories actually make some of these bands more interesting than what they might be based on if you just listen to them or read some basic online article about them. But there's something very different. This is one of the ones that I want to especially mention, this Toribos, because even though this could get a little bit boring, I must admit that it's more about archaeology rather than about anything related to music. This is about quite a bit about Göbekli Tepe. I don't know how it's pronounced, but Göbekli Tepe, the place in Turkish, which is very, very ancient. So this is more about, archaeological topics, places like these stone statues without heads, and some heads are here, rather than talking about music in the first place or related to metal. So these are very, very interesting topics in my opinion, even though sometimes feels like you're really reading a scientific research. And I think also this antediluvian thing was also very insightful, and it's nice to see, or more like nice to read, how some people are so down to earth and kind of humble even if they're making music which is seen extreme metal. That is, these people tell openly about their stories which might be very, very anti-metal all in all, and they open these pages to their history where they just tell how everything came to be and what affected them in songwriting or lyrical content, or how they started to perceive things in different ways. I mean, what I'm trying to say here is that when we're getting older, life is very, very different when you're just younger. Your 18 years old self might be like, okay, fuck the society, fuck Christianity, fuck Islam, fuck this and that. And then you're just about like writing those really hateful lyrics and like drinking booze and chasing the tail or whatever. When you're 30s, things get a little bit different. When you're 40s, things are gonna be quite different. And this is always the basic generational thing, Older people are like, oh, those youngsters, they don't understand a thing. I'm gonna yell at that cloud right there. But that is very much represented here, what I would say anti-poser kind of thing. People who pose, they're still the same in their 50s as they when they're 20s. I think that's bullshit. I mean, if you're gonna make statements as a 45er, like which are gonna sound like you're 18 years old, I think it's either a sign that you're immature or you're just posing. They're convincing the younger audience. Look, I still drink the virgin's blood every day in order to stay in shape to worship Satan. Whatever, bro. Anyway, I might have tried to say there are now such bands featured here. And what is really cool is that even sometimes some of these answers, rarely, but sometimes, some of them are quite cringy, are like, are you serious? But Niklas Göransson never seems to judge these bands. He just goes and questions, explains the backstory, which is very, very interesting. Now, one of the very interesting stories is here by Cold Meat Industry, because it's a Swedish label, or used to be the Swedish label, releasing a lot of dark ambient, martial, industrial, neo-folk and all that stuff. Back in the days, especially in the 90s and early 2000s, it was a very, very important label. I remember getting some copies for review from the band. I still have some releases, like some dark ambient ones from the label. I remember having really cool layouts and all, and more importantly, releasing good music from the darker side of what could be described as electronic music, or music related to electronics, not being metal, but not being mainstream pop or anything like that. Very dark music in general, sometimes more martial nature, sometimes more twisted and sinister kind of stuff. A very important label, and this interview right here goes through to that story with the founder and how he left the label and how he kind of came back. Very, very insightful story. One of also, in my opinion, very interesting stories is with the dungeon synth artist Mortis, who is telling here a story about Norwegian 1990s and all that stuff. You know, it is kind of like going back in time. It's, you know, one of those reminiscent stories, which I find very, very fascinating. I did a Mortis interview on video a couple of years ago at Steelfest, and this kind of touches the same topics and yet still goes in very, very different ways. There's a lot of talk, for example, about Vikernes and Euronymous stories, so it's very interesting. Then there are more musical interviews in a way, which is like Monumentum and Mqua. They're interesting, but different ways. But I find that Mortis and Cold Meat Industry among the most interesting ones on this issue. But the real interesting story, it's not even this Warlock one, which is also interesting, partially because he's my friend, but also because kind of a mystic underground figure. But this one, Ordo Templi Aeternae Lucis. I don't know why I keep saying that in so American ways. Anyway, this is a very interesting story because it tells you a lot of history about Necromancer, not the band, but, you know, actually digging up corpses and doing rituals with them and crimes related to opening graves and digging up bones and corpses. Very, very fascinating, if morbid story. Something that if you would read only one story on this particular issue, that would be this interview. Doesn't matter if you don't know the music. I don't, but now I got me interested. And one of the things which I want to mention is from a band that I don't myself find captivating in music, but what I like in terms of what he's saying, and that's Hex Vessel. Matt from Hex Vessel, ex-British guy nowadays, living in Finland, has been living here for many, many years, has a family here, actually married to a friend of mine. He tells a lot of good stuff in his interview, and this is the point where I was kind of referring to when I was talking about being more mature with your life and not sounding like you're in your 20s when you're actually in your 40s. Very, very interesting and insightful interview overall because he has a lot of sense. I really like people who can, you know, combine elements from being more mature and yet not sounding like a boomer or some middle-aged bored guy. You know, still finding a lot of fascinating things in things like black metal or nature, yet also at the same time having this more mature aspect in life. All in all, what I'm saying here is this issue is way more interesting than how this index might show to you. I mean, if I were to just decide based on which kind of bands I like, there would be like a couple of bands I would like, okay, I'm gonna read that Mgwa and Warlock ones and not so much the others because they don't really interest me musically. And this kind of brings me to the last, but maybe the most important point of interviews wherever, but especially in Bardo Methodology. And that is the fact, sometimes a band, an artist, might make dull music, but they still might have very important and interesting stories to tell, interesting things to say. And it's totally different thing what the music is doing. And sometimes your favorite artist might be doing the best albums ever, but they might have nothing of interest to say. And that is kind of a paradox in so many ways. It's as if you have the best album in your collection, but you really can't stand or understand the lyrics. Sometimes you read great lyrics, but the music ain't too shabby. Two different worlds. And I would say it's even more than that. I think it's more like a triangle of sorts. See, me drawing a triangle in air. That is, here you have the music. Maybe that it's the top of it all, because otherwise you wouldn't be really interested in these two dots, these corners. And these other two corners are the lyrical content, the cover art and all, that which is very much tied to this musical part, but it's not exactly music, because it has nothing to do with riffs or drum fills or whatever. And then you have this final corner, and that is interviews. One would even make a claim it's kind of a square, like live appearance, music, lyrical content, and cover art and interviews. Doesn't matter how you see it, the point here is band is way more than this one dot called the music, even if this would be the most important. Maybe there is an actual pentagram of sorts Maybe there are 5 points, maybe more, I don't know. But what I'm trying to say here, once again, give interviews a chance, even if you don't necessarily like the band. That is not to say you should be reading your Sabaton or Murkur interviews in case you just hate the music. I mean, obviously, there's just too much stuff to be done in order to waste it on stuff you just hate or dislike. But in general, when you buy, say, a magazine or fanzine like this, because you find a couple of things interesting, go forward. Maybe you don't necessarily read every interview. Maybe you don't necessarily read all the pages. But I strongly suggest at least giving a chance. And a little bit in the beginning saying like, okay, this person, this artist has way more interesting stories to be told than what his or her music suggests. Personally, I read each and every page on this issue as well. I've gone through all of the Bardo issues I have gotten so far, except the Archeology Part 2, which is gonna be read right after this one during the summer. So there you have it. Go check it out. Once again, here it is, what Bardo site is all about. Here you will find home, archive, about, print, and all that stuff. You will find some of these interviews right there, so you can pretty much just give it a go in case you have never ever ordered or gotten a physical copy that is this printed zine for your reading pleasure. But you can see at least a glimpse of that quality online on the Bardo site. So give it a go and give it a chance. I think this is high quality zine for people who actually think what they read. Thank you for watching the review. See you soon with more stuff coming away.